We're just trying to make sure.
She doesn't even have to read. No, you're good.
Maddie, you're good. Okay, morning everybody. I have two discussion questions for us today to talk about over the homework reading from last night about working conditions. The first one says, what attitudes about women and children do you see reflected in work and pay patterns during the mid-19th century? Or in other words, what do the three occupations have in common here on these pages? And then the second question says, of the three types of occupation shown, which job earned the most and had the best conditions? Obviously, none of these occupations had great pay or conditions, but which one was the best relatively? So take a few minutes, I'll give you about 5 minutes to think about these questions, maybe jot down a couple of ideas in your notebook, and then we'll share. While you're thinking, just a reminder that this Friday we'll have current events, but then we won't have current events for the following 2 weeks after that because we have an Imaginarium field trip scheduled for Friday the 18th, and then we have parent-teacher conferences the following Friday on the 25th, so you guys won't even be here that day. Yep, Aaron?
What's the field trip?
Ooh, I can't tell you yet. I don't know. Has Mrs. Green told
Yeah,
us?
Mrs. Green told us.
Okay. Never mind. All right, she spoiled the surprise. That's okay. It's we're going to the art museum.
Oh.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and we'll be gone. We'll still have our academic classes, but we'll have like really short, like I think 10-minute classes or something like that that Friday. So obviously we won't have time to do current events or much of anything. We'll probably. Next Friday, we'll probably be working on our study guide for the next test, so we'll be just discussing that and taking questions and that kind of thing. talk about this a little bit. First of all, before we get to these questions, how many of you here currently have a job? About 4 people. Okay. Who can tell me what is your job? What do you do? And how are your working conditions different than these? Hopefully there are a lot of differences, right? What are some major things that are different? Yeah, Olivia?
I teach ballet classes.
Okay.
And I get paid like minimum wage. There's not like,
Yeah.
I don't know, not the bad conditions that they have. And I guess nowadays everyone, well, most of the time, men and women are paid equally.
Yeah, they are. Okay, good. Yeah, the equal pay thing was never added as an amendment into the Constitution, but it's, I mean, most places have laws, equal pay. So. Plus, if business owners didn't give equal pay, there'd be this huge uprising because obviously women wouldn't put up with that nowadays. So, okay, good. And where is it that you teach, Olivia?
One studio in Leo and one studio, Mrs. Hazlett's studio.
Oh, okay. All right, cool. Great. And how many hours a week do you, or how many hours a week do you work typically?
Like 4. Not too bad.
Okay, yeah, not too bad. Paige?
I help teach classes for Olivia with my mom, and I get minimum wage as well.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, obviously the conditions are fine, and I help 1 to 2 hours a week.
Mhm.
So.
Okay, good. Now, for your mother's other employees, maybe if she has somebody does she have anybody working for her full-time? Do you know,
No,
or is
like,
it mostly
she works-
part-time instructors?
I mean, she has like Olivia and my friend Madeline both teach classes,
Mhm.
and then I don't know, she used to be the majority, but it's kind of evenly divided between the 3 of them now.
Mhm.
And then I help and sub.
Okay, and is your mom like the sole owner and
Mhm.
director of that business? Okay, well, that's nice if she can set all of her own,
Yeah.
to an extent, she
Right.
can set all of her own hours and things like that. Okay, good. Holly?
I work at the YMCA and I watch the little kids at Child Watch.
Oh, neat, I didn't know you
So a
did
bit
that.
of a stressful job,
I bet.
but the working conditions are much better than
Yeah.
what these people had to suffer. And I work with men too, so
Yeah.
like we all get paid the same amount. And
Wow. Now, what age group do you work with there?
it
All
doesn't
different
matter,
ages
like,
of kids?
We've had, we can take up to 6 weeks old, and then sometimes we'll have 12 years old.
Okay,
So,
okay, yeah,
you know,
that's
it's
a big,
age range.
yeah, big age range. Now, are there any specific rules that your employer have told you about that are meant to protect you or the kids? Like, obviously, when you're working with children, there are certain things that you can and can't do.
Like, you can't, if you wanna hug them, you go side hug them.
Yes.
Cause if
Yes.
someone's walking by and you see them like hugging a child,
Mhm.
people get suspicious.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
there are a lot of things that can happen.
Speculation
Yeah.
about what's going on there, yeah. Yeah, it used to be, especially for teachers, it used to be that teachers could, hug kids, hit them.
Yeah.
Actually, did you guys know that in the state of Indiana, corporal punishment in schools is still legal? It really hasn't been outlawed. Now, it's socially looked down upon in most school systems, and it's up to the individual school system to decide whether or not teachers are allowed to hit students. But in some places, they still do, which, is kind of funny to think about. I know my parents talk about, they grew up in a strict Catholic school, and they talked about getting hit by nuns and, all of that stuff. And and I laugh, and they're like, it wasn't funny back then, though, it was scary. Holly?
I actually had to take a really serious course on child abuse and preventing it, and if you see signs of it, what you should do.
Yes, you're legally required to report something if you hear about.
And if you do not report it and you did know something about it,
Yeah.
you could be in danger.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You can be taken to court, not only lose your job, but.
That's happened before in plenty
Yeah.
of times before.
Yeah. Training is another thing that employees have to go through now, no matter what your job is, even if you're, working at a fast food restaurant, if you're a high school student or something like that, you always have to go through some sort of training so that you know what the specific rules and regulations are for your work environment. And then all teachers have to go through, well, at least if you work in the public school system, have to go through like this airborne pathogen and blood training where you learn the proper way to, like if a kid throws up in class, you learn the proper way to dispose of it, because it's so easy nowadays to contract illnesses and viruses through people's blood and things like that. So it's just very interesting how things have shifted that way. Good. And who was the fourth person? Marnay? And where do you work and what do you do?
I work at Concert Music, that's in Georgetown.
Okay.
I give guitar lessons.
Oh, okay.
The conditions are way better. For one, we have air conditioning.
Nice. Very nice.
But yeah, like it's a lot different because you're not like really like doing any hard work. You're just like, I don't know, I feel like I'm doing nothing.
Okay.
It's really fun. It's fun. That's I
Yeah.
think that's the big difference is that I like have fun doing it.
Yeah.
It's really easy.
Well,
I did.
and-
did
oh,
the
I'm
same-
sorry.
Yeah, same wages as the guys. so-
Good. I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I think you mentioned, it's fun, it doesn't seem like work for you. It's always nice when when your job is something that you enjoy doing already, like teaching dance. I mean, sure, it's a job, you have to go in and do it, and maybe sometimes you don't feel like going in, but at least on the whole, you enjoy what you're doing. So that's nice as well. Very, very nice as well. Okay, so let's get to these questions. So number one, what are the attitudes towards women and children during this time period? We talked a little bit about this already yesterday with the women in the mills, but what specifically do these passages tell us about the conditions that would give us an idea of the attitudes?
Especially for like the mill workers and the slaves. Even like, well, for the slaves they didn't actually get paid anything. For the mill workers, even though they got paid less, they were still expected to do the same amount of work for the most part. So like even kids that are like, in some of the mills there were like 4 to 10-year-olds working.
Right.
So they're expected to do like that heavy, I mean it's not the same as like field labor, but they're still doing stuff that's probably too much for their bodies to be handling, and they're not getting paid for it, or they're barely getting paid at all.
Right. So they're being, I think that the word exploitation is a good one to use in this instance, right? They're being exploited. They're being used really against their will. I mean, it's not like a little kid can say, oh, I really, at this juncture, I don't feel like I'm ready to work yet. I'd rather, there were no laws protecting children against working back then. So, yeah, that obviously. Okay, good. What other patterns? Lauren?
It seems like it's like one of the first times like women are really to go out to work like that.
Yes.
So
Yes.
maybe they're not even expecting as much as the other.
Well, yeah, exactly. I think I mentioned yesterday how, before this time, before the factories, most women, didn't have jobs per se. They had jobs that they didn't get paid for, right? They helped around the house, they helped to raise the kids, they cooked, they did some of the farming chores, or, they might have helped with, work in and around factories and industries before, but probably they didn't get paid for it. So actually, this is a positive thing. Relatively compared with now, this was a very positive move for women. It's just that it took us a while to get all of the regulations right in order to protect the workers. So, and of course now we have all of these child labor laws as well. How old do you have to be to actually have a job in Indiana? Paige?
14, but you have to have a worker's permit.
Ah, okay, yeah. So I can remember what the age is, it changes all the time, but yeah, I remember when I was in high school, I think I got my first job when I was 16 or 17, so I don't know that I think I still had to get something from my school though, saying that I was allowed to work a certain number of hours a week, that sort of thing. So, and of course you can have a job where, for your parents or something like that, or for a neighbor if you're watching their kids, or if you mow their lawn or whatever, but to actually be legally an employee of an organization or a company, you have to follow these restrictions. So, good. Anything else for number one that you wrote down? Okay, good. How about number two? Which job earned the most and had the best conditions of the three mentioned here, Aaron?
I would kind of have to say the farming thing because depending on what you're growing could depend on how much that you make.
True, yeah, that's very true. The mill workers, if you look at their payment, says $1 to $6 a week, which at least that was steady. The farmers, as Erin just mentioned, depending on the time of year and how the crops were doing, it's kind of an unsettling and unsteady occupation, even now for farmers. They're still relying on what things are gonna be worth each season and, you know, how the weather is doing and that kind of thing, or trade with other countries. Lauren?
For the farmers, it talks about like how the fathers and sons do things and the mothers and daughters do things, and I think that's probably better, cause I know like with the working in the factories, a lot of families were like separated.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Some of these young women just kind of left their homes and went and stayed and boarded at these factories. So boarded, you know, meaning that they stayed there overnight and they were fed and all this stuff. So they might not even have seen their families for a long time. Good, Olivia?
I thought how even though they had really bad conditions in the factories, outside of that, they had like a home to live and they had meals provided,
Yeah.
so that was a big benefit.
Yeah, that was a constant, right? They always knew they were gonna be fed and taken care of. Good. Okay. Which job would you have preferred? If you were looking back then, what do you think you would have chosen? Erin?
Farming.
Farming? Okay. Why?
I don't know. I like labor a little bit, and I could probably handle a farm.
Paige?
I would say farming as well, but because you're with your family, so
Yeah.
that helps. I mean, like, it's not terrible working conditions, and even though it may not be a steady pay like a mill work is, like, you're still almost guaranteed to have enough to support your family on, so.
Yeah.
I think that farming would be great because, especially what Erin said about how, the men and the women have like to do equal amounts of work, so I think it's more fair and plus you'd have more stability.
I have a question about, like, the people, the slaves who had to work in the cotton,
Yeah.
like picking the cotton, does
Yeah.
that hurt to pick? Or
Yes.
is it just, okay.
Yes, it's very
Okay.
painful.
Okay.
That's why the cotton gin was a great device. But yeah, cotton, I don't know if anybody's ever felt like cotton before it's been processed before. Obviously, like if you feel cotton, like a cotton ball is really soft and nice. And parts of the cotton plant are like that, right? Obviously, that's where we get cotton from. But like when it's growing, it grows in fields just like wheat does. And cotton plants look like, it's like, so here's the, it's got all these different little things. They have these like, really hard like burrs which are kind of like thorns, but they're not quite as sharp as thorns, but these burrs, so the slaves would go through and not only have to like pick the heads of cotton, but they would have to then go through and sort, like it was really tedious. It would be like pulling, you know, when you shuck corn, if anybody's ever shucked ears of corn before, then it's got all those little threads in it. Well, imagine like pulling all of those little threads off one by one, but they're hard and sharp at the end. Like that's what they're doing all day. So yeah, they would have, I mean, first of all, they'd be bent over all day, so your back would just, you can imagine how painful it was. And you're outside no matter what the weather is doing. Usually it was really hot because it's in the south and humid. And you're using your hands to do things, and obviously since these, you know, slaves are not getting paid to work, they're not really even regarded as real human beings, so it's not like the slave owners are thinking, oh, her hands must hurt, let me give you some gloves, some gardening gloves for that. No, you know, they're just kind of, suffer. Take my cotton and suffer, right? Holly?
Whenever we went to the South, for a family trip, I remember seeing that, the slaves lived in like almost animal-like houses because they
Yeah.
treated their slaves like animals.
Yeah.
And they like ate out of like
Troughs.
pigs eat out of
Yeah.
and things like that.
Yeah, like on yeah. Now, I mean, yeah, the slaves were, you know, they were provided shelter and food, but the food was like slop, right? The same things that was given to the animals, no protein in it. I mean, you know, it was not enough to sustain them to be able to work for like a 14-hour day, which was usually the case. So anyway, but yeah, you could actually, in the picture here, the black and white picture, they're picking cotton here. So you can see it's like regular kind of tree branch looking sharp, twigs. So they're walking through that and trying to get through that. And then you have the little heads of the cotton there. But if you look, like especially up here towards the upper left-hand side, you can see the little like burr tops that kind of like reach over the top. Okay, take a minute to look here at this where it says data file over on the right-hand side with the pie chart there. The pie chart shows the annual cost of maintaining one field slave. So in other words, this is what the owner is shelling out money-wise for each slave for over a year. So the total that you would pay back then for one slave is $21.05 for the whole year, and I think that it's kind of humorous in a dark way, I suppose, but humorous. If you look at what was the largest portion of their money going to?
Supervision.
The supervision. Supervision meaning what? They had to pay someone to look over the slaves and make sure that they were doing what they were supposed to do, right? So these slave masters that you see in movies, they're always the ones with the whips and gate working, Yeah, so most of that money wasn't even to take care of the slave, it was to hire someone else to look over the slave. Okay, and then obviously a very small amount of taxes, medical care, supposedly for the slaves, although I don't know who, I suppose that obviously you'd be willing to pay a little bit of money to make sure that your slave doesn't die, because if they do, then you have to replace them. You have to purchase another slave to take their place. But I'm sure that slave owners didn't really put that much thought and care into like minor sicknesses of their slaves. They just had to wait it out and get better on their own. Food and clothing, what is that, $8.50 it looks like for the year. So not very much. And obviously the numbers that we're working with here are relatively way less than what we are now, but then we have two charts here that give the average monthly earnings of certain occupations, both during this time period, workers in the mid-19th century, so mid-1800s, and then also from the 1990s, which of course wasn't that long ago here, so they're probably still pretty comparable to today's monthly salary earnings. So if you take a look at, for example, like an artisan, somebody who would have made their own product, right, to sell, in the year 1830, they're bringing in $45 a month, compared to, most people make a couple $1,000s a month here in America, depending on what their job is, especially if they have, some sort of professional job. So anyway, and the jobs that are presented here, these are occupations that typically don't make a whole lot of money compared with other professional jobs, quote unquote. So doctors, lawyers, business people, things like that. Anyway, well, what do they mean by service worker? What is a service worker in the 1990s chart? What kind of jobs would a service worker do? They don't get paid very much, you know this. Yeah.
Maybe I don't know, but like service, like community service stuff, like.
Yeah, like a
trash
social
man.
worker. Yeah. Typically service workers, they're talking about people who are working for like non-for-profits, working with families and children who might need help with various things. That's what a social worker does, and so typically, even though it's a very rewarding job, they don't make very much money because there's not a lot of money coming in from the government to pay them. So they're, a lot of times they're doing it out of the kindness of their own heart, really. They're almost like volunteers, but so they don't make very much at all. And then a construction worker, typical construction worker, makes about $2,000 a month. So You know, and obviously the cost of living was way, way less back then. I remember when I was little, we took a field trip to the Lincoln Museum in Fort Wayne. Has everybody been there before? No?
Yeah.
No? Some of you haven't been to the Lincoln Museum? I don't know what it's like now. When I was little, it was pretty cool. And they have this. Oh, is it
I
closed
think it's
now?
closed.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, that's disappointing. Okay. Shows how much I know about that now. Okay, I haven't been there in a long time, obviously. But when I went, they had a little, like, it looked like a dollhouse replica of Lincoln's house they used in when he was president. And it said under, it was this huge house with several bedrooms, and it said the Lincolns purchased this house for, I think it was like $5,000 or something like that, right? Which it would probably cost like $1 million now, or $500,000 or something like that. So shows the money range. Okay, good. Any other questions or comments before we stop for today? Yeah,
This is
Laura?
kind of random, but when was like the White House built, that, like all the presidents live in?
What's that? I'm
When
sorry.
was like the White House built?
Wait, I think the White House, I don't think that Washington lived in it yet. I think it was maybe built, you know, that's a good question, I don't know. But I know that not every president has lived in it, because Washington lived, what's the name of this house? Not Valley Forge. I've been there before. But it was just kind of a modest, like, stone house, like a 2-story. Yeah, good question. I'll have to look that up. It'll probably talk about it in here. I know Thomas Jefferson, who was the 3rd president, he built Monticello for himself. That's the house that's on the back of the penny, I believe. So that's in West Virginia. He lived there. So maybe during like the 6th or 7th presidency, they decided to have like a standard house page.
You know when the White House like built now was first built? Like the one that like,
I think that's
That's
what
what
that's
Obama
what
lives
you're
in?
talking about, right? This White House?
Yeah.
It's been around for a long time though. But I'm assuming that they do like revisions on it and, you know, keep up repairs and that kind of thing. But, yeah, great question. I'm gonna make myself a note to look it up, because now I'm curious. Who has visited the White House before in Washington DC? Do you remember, Holly, when it was built, did they say? 18 something, that's all I know. It's very broad, but. Okay. So for tomorrow then, we will do our last section of chapter 3. It talks a little bit more about workers' rights, really gets into talking about slavery and how we begin to abolish slavery or get rid of it. And talks a little bit more about women's rights and the development of those. So, good section. Okay, and then Friday we'll do our current events. Hey, you have the last minute or so yourself. Does anyone smell that burning?
Yeah, I just noticed.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the heat, it might be the heat. They might have turned on the heating.
Honestly,
Yeah.
literally, I was just like, I was just like, I was like,
Somebody better not burn back.
Yeah, they're comprehensive plans.
yeah, it smells like burnt hair.
Yeah.
Like someone like
I like
curled their
just
hair.
noticed it.
Like strange.
I really turned on the
Yeah, that's probably. That hasn't been turned on.